Hello everybody, welcome to a new episode about our RV build. As you might recall, we recently bought a gigantic bus, which is 40 feet long, and it's a C-category vehicle, which is an important detail. We can convert the interior in basically any way we desire. Like, we can do almost anything, given that this is a specialized vehicle. In the previous episode, we completely gutted the interior of this bus, which allows for us to do some plotting. So the plan for today is to flesh out the rearrangements that we have in mind. Work out the dimensions, figure out where we're going, and begin sorting the hardware, which is incredibly expensive. According to Yegor's estimates, this episode might cost us a good $7,000. Be careful not to trip over the couch. We got it right here. In reality, we've already been discussing what we do with the bus. We've done some sketches. Here are some of the options. This is far from a design project, but we do have a general understanding of where to go with this. We're gonna leave 5 feet for the 4 seats placed in a row. They'll have folding backrests. Then we can get a table going. A divider between this section and the driver and front passenger. I've got a tape measure on the floor, which is showing me 6.5 feet. That's the standard width of a couch, which in our case is going to fold out. Here there is room for a table, for a few folding seats right here. Here we'll have a fireplace, which won't take up too much space anyway. Here I reckon we can place a few drawers, or something along those lines. We'll have plenty of space in this area. A kitchen block, a washing machine with a dryer, a shower and a toilet right here. Now what I personally like the most is how high up this rear section is. This is going to be the cargo bay. We've decided to bring the floor up to about right here. We'll have a sleeper back here, and we'll have a cargo bay which will be able to fit some bikes, motorcycles, buggies. All of the water reservoirs and air conditioners will be located in this middle section right here. It'll also be accommodating all of the batteries and all that. As you can see, right underneath is where they placed the engine. I don't like that it's sitting so low. Right now there's no air in the suspension, but still, wouldn't want it to take a hit. These stairs could be equipped with some shelves where you could place your shoes. As for this gigantic section back here, the rear hatch is going to double as a ramp. We'll make it so that it comes down level with the ground. We'll naturally reinforce it so that it doesn't collapse when you drive onto it. And in here, we'll have a spacious chamber with a height of over 6 feet. Over 6 feet in length and in width as well. We're gonna get a proper cargo bay happening in here. We've worked out that the frame on this bus goes only to the rear wheels, with this being just a balcony, basically an overhang. As a result, it doesn't have much in the way of structural integrity. We're going to have to seriously reinforce this box back here, especially if we're going to be transporting heavy items. So basically, if we bring something in here and the floor begins to collapse, it'll take the roof down with it as well. All in all, I'd say there's plenty of space in here. Given the layout that we have in mind for accommodating 6, we even have some room to spare. These last few days, me and Yegor were busy figuring out what we might need in terms of utilities. What sort of generators, batteries, how many of them, and so on. Ultimately, we decided that we simply lack the knowledge to be able to get the job done in one swing, and do it properly. This sort of equipment costs a fortune. For example, a portable toilet costs anywhere between $50,000 and $2,000. And we have no idea which one is fit for our application. And it was the same story with everything else. Inverters, convectors. We began making a list, but that just brought up a ton of questions to which we have no answers. That's true. And so we've decided to visit some people who build RVs for a living. We'll be paying them a visit to pick their brains a bit, poke around, and maybe even gain a better understanding on the entire matter. Now, if this were a regular sink of that size, you're not lifting it with 2 fingers.
They don't use that too often in these rigs. Now, it only seems as if these are huge vehicles with tons of space, but do bear in mind that the more it's carrying, the more fuel it consumes, the more cumbersome it becomes, and so on. What you need to do is figure out a waterproofing solution. Fix everything that's rusted out. You see, the skeleton of that bus was made using square tubing. That actually allows for hacking off whatever you need to and welding a new piece back on. What it definitely needs is to be treated. Your cheapest option would be extruded polystyrene foam. For it to soak up water and become twice as heavy, that's something I've personally never seen happen, unlike fiberglass wool. Ideally, the thicker the material, the better, but you can't have anything less than 2 inches. Spray-on polyurethane foam is one solution they use when building houses. Just make sure it's closed cell, and you should definitely begin by working out how to secure the sheathing, some sort of nut certs that would stick out from the foam. Once you figure out the framework, you'll need to route all of the hardware. The enclosures where you'll have all of the wiring, you might want to route some of the wires and pipes straight away. Then you'll need to think about where you'll be making space for all of the containers, where you'll be placing the generator, your gas cylinders. These are all things that will affect the hardware packaging process. Actually, these are things you can do simultaneously. So first you place an object, and then you run whatever stuff you need to it. A good idea is to mock it all up using boxes to get a visual representation. Or you could just go by the blueprints, but those are not an easy thing to make.
How much are we looking at? 13, 25, 40 grand?
You should be able to keep it under 100,000. 90, 110, 135,000 is how much these things cost to build from the ground up.
We've just left that shop, and I have to say that it was a very useful experience. I gather we should do something like that more often, as in meet up with professionals who've already done these sorts of conversions, in order to avoid making mistakes, to save a bit of cash, and most importantly save ourselves a bunch of time. Even at this point, they reckon we'll be working on this build for something like 3 years and spend at least 100,000 euros. This whole thing can easily go south. Oh, that's inevitable in my opinion. I am definitely not getting my hopes up and thinking that we can hammer this out in a matter of months. First off, this is going to be one very expensive build. Second, we've never done anything like this before. So chances are we'll go down one wrong path, have to tear it all down and start again. That said, there actually are a few positive things that we can take away from this. First off, they did say that we'll need to tear the whole bus down to the core. His words were literally, if I were building myself an RV, I wouldn't even bother buying a donor vehicle. I'd just weld my own frame.
Exactly, since we are looking at piecing together a completely new skeleton for that bus.
So we begin with a complete teardown, then we go all out with the heat insulation, eliminate anything that might allow heat to escape, such as unnecessary windows. So after we put together a plan, which we are going to have to do, we are going to leave the glass in place for cosmetic purposes, but in some places there won't be any windows, such as behind the couch. It would have just kept getting covered in condensation. Then we get a heated floor happening, which will be the foundation for the bus's heating system. They also told us that you need 2 ventilation channels going down the ceiling, a sort of blow dryer type heating system, where you open up one area, fill it with warm air, and the next one is blocked off while nobody is in there. And that same circuit can be used for air conditioning too. You just trip a switch somewhere and cool off the entire cabin. They also said that everything needs to be fed gas. The refrigerator, the tea kettle. Turns out we don't even need a portable bio-toilet. We just need to install a huge reservoir which will store all of the dirty water that you leave behind after taking a shower or washing the dishes, for example. I can just imagine the space underneath the floor where we've already got the engine, next to that you have the cargo bay, and amidst all of that we need to find room for the reservoirs, the gas hardware, generator. There's not going to be much space left, but the main thing they shared, which was actually the first thing we touched on when we came over, all of it has to weigh as little as possible, and that's despite the fact that we can carry a tremendous load. How much was it, 6 tons? Yeah, it's something like 6 or 7 tons. They say we can easily blow right past that mark without even noticing. The response to my 260 gallons of clean water was like 130 clean, 130 waste. And even then they said that we should go with like 50 to 80 gallons for the dirty water. After all, this is going to account for a lot of weight, and that might turn into a pretty serious problem. Right, so we need to put together some kind of schematic with all of the hardware, some load-bearing beams and frame rails, so that on the one hand we still have access to all of that equipment, and on the other we figure out in advance how we can save ourselves some time and effort. For now the plan is to go to the garage and tear down whatever is left, as in remove the trim from the ceiling, take the floor apart, give it a comprehensive inspection. We might even need to bring it in for a service, check the engine, the brakes, sort out all of that jazz and forget about it. And it's already time for us to start searching for a winter garage. They did ask us whether we gave that any thought, as in where are we going to be working on the build during the winter and so on. In the summer it's all super easy, but when the weather gets cold, things are going to change pretty drastically. I mean, don't get us wrong, we're not complaining or anything. We're actually pretty enthusiastic, and we can't wait to get to work. So a few days have gone by since we visited that shop where they build RVs on a professional level. We've already found a guy who does 3D modeling, and we've arranged a full scan of the inside of our bus once we completely tear the thing apart. At a certain point, me and Yegor began discussing the financial aspect of this project, and we came to the conclusion that if we do everything as we were instructed at that shop, then we're gonna spend exactly the amount of money they projected, which is about $100,000. And if I'm being honest, that's an astronomical figure. At the end of the day, this is an experimental build, and spending anything over $27,000, minus the bus itself of course, to me that's just unacceptable. And so we've decided to go about this in a slightly different manner. Oh wait, was that the cue for me to weigh in? What a smooth segue, dude. We are not going to be tearing off the floorboards. If you look closely, this plywood right here isn't rotting, and it's secured nicely. Instead, we're going to be applying heat insulation from underneath. Another problem is that if the build takes too long and costs too much, well, ultimately this series is just going to be dragged out for an indefinite amount of time. Second, we might lose our drive along the way. That did happen with the Lambo, so we need to find the right balance here. For example, we're not going to be putting in heated floors at this stage. A heated floor goes for about $1,300, but warm socks are something like $20. So that's a win in my book. We'll be putting in some quality heat insulation all around, fitting some ducts onto the ceiling, which will be carrying warm air whenever we tap into the power grid. But given a situation when we're disconnected from the grid, we'll be using the fireplace to keep ourselves warm. This is all going to be a balancing act. We know for sure that this section has to be taken apart so that we can begin piecing together our second floor and route all of the hardware, plumbing, electricity, and what have you. The piping and wiring itself is pretty cheap. As for how we get everything connected in the middle of the bus, well, that's something that we can figure out as we go. What sort of inverters and generators to use, how big the batteries need to be, and so on. These are all secondary matters that we can tend to as we progress with the build. We might even get rid of that rear window. All of this stuff might present a problem for us. We'll still have a fantastic view, what with the panoramic glass we've got installed. And on top of that, you'll have a bed up front which will have its own panoramic glass. So really the best we can do is keep things simple and just work. What sort of condition are the lower bits in? It all looks pretty nasty, but I don't see any holes. There is something left for us to reinforce. It's all because you had condensation dripping from the windows for 30 years. The condensation was a result of temperature differentials, with water forming on the windows and dripping downwards. They did tell us at the shop that we should figure out which windows to leave and which to block off. Whether we leave the glass untouched for a better look, or weld in a piece of sheet metal, like they did with that rear window. I reckon we should leave the windows in place. If you take a look at that rear pane from the outside, it does look pretty terrible. I mean, even if you paint it, it's still all wavy. Even if we were to apply a 2-inch thick layer of heat insulation, that should do it for us. We won't even see any condensation. The temperature on either side of that glass would just be the same. We literally just worked out that this cavity down here is square-shaped. The rear end is actually pretty intricate. You can see that it's rounded off. We've got a set of lights. There's just too much to rearrange back here, and it all appears to be pointless anyway. We're referring to that idea that we had about making a hatch/ramp for you to load cargo or, say, an ATV. We examined the flank, and it turns out that this part is completely flat. We can just make a hatch right here, and if you need to load in some kind of vehicle, you just whip out some portable ramps made from aluminum. The basic concept remains the same, but this will simplify the build substantially. We just cut this bit right out. It's not reinforced or anything, and we've got ourselves a door. But rearranging all of that, reinforcing the hatch itself to make it sturdy, plus there's that entire mechanism for opening and closing. Now this part right here mostly consists of box tubing, which is actually pretty slender. I really don't think it's a good idea to overload that panel in the back of the bus.
Opa.
Oh my goodness. Looks like a cubby you'd use for smuggling stuff. It is huge! How much is that, 3 feet? 5 feet? Now we've got room for us to stick a reservoir. We literally just found out about this after owning this bus for a month, and we're still discovering new cubbies. Alright, check this out. We've got a second floor going. These tubes will be placed a bit lower to have them flush. And this right here is the most durable part, with square tubing converging from all directions, making this a sort of center of a spider web, and everything beyond that is just tacked on. Now I'm standing right above the rear wheels, and so all of that we're going to need to reinforce. And very carefully. There's always somebody who screws up during a journey, and now we'll have a place where they can serve their punishment, and we'll be sending them down there not just through the exterior hatch. We should definitely make some kind of opening in here. Even a door this big will be enough for you to be able to climb in there and grab something, though it is crucial for us to get an airtight seal going. Now that's pretty cool. I mean, you can stand here without even bending over, and you've still got plenty of room up there if you want to lie down or sit down. Now we get to the part where we finalize this structure. Get some additional reinforcement happening, weld it all the way around, connect it all in this area, and that's when we get to covering the cargo bay. I think our best bet would be to dedicate this episode to finishing work on the cargo area, separating it from the rest of the bus. Okay, then it's time for us to get back to work. Okay, here's where we are with the second floor. I think we can probably climb in there and see how much space we got, but overall you can already tell that we have plenty. What's awesome is that this window is level with the bed. You get a panoramic view, which makes this even better than if we placed the bed right here. You can lie down like this or like this. We'll have a divider right here. Here we'll have an access port, like a sliding door. We were looking to install a staircase right here, but the further we go, the more it seems as if one step is going to be enough. Meanwhile, we're also looking into what options we have in terms of rolling shutters. For example, here we have a used set on sale for $200, 79 by 79 inches. I reckon it should be a perfect fit for this space. Turns out Igor has a buddy who works with these rolling shutters. He'll be paying us a visit and giving us a few pointers within the next few days. After that, we'll order something up for our project. We'd also like to clean out everything that we won't be needing from this area, rip the floorboards off, and see what sort of condition everything is in. If we need to, we'll do some welding and reinforcement work on the spot. And with that, we've gotten this space to what you're seeing right now. Now it's a nice place to be. We are currently in the process of unraveling a few mysteries here and there. We are treasure hunting. Igor the safe cracker. And just as we expected, that is indeed the fuel tank. Underneath the step you can see a cavity, so this is basically our bus's frame. At first it appears as if you can just hack it off, it being useless. But as a matter of fact, I see something tied in from the sides. Are those the trailing arms? I don't know, we might be able to shorten it. Well, you can look at it this way and see it as a step that you can use to climb back up. Or you can use this as a toilet. It's ready for use? Yeah, that's what you'd call an actual bio-toilet. We've also got these hazardous bits, which also need to be dealt with. I have to say that overall, this bus is in pretty decent shape. You can even go so far as to call the condition good. I have some great news for you peeps. Yesterday we went and spent $70 and bought ourselves some rolling shutters. These were 3 times cheaper than what they'd cost new, 67 inches wide. We will be removing a few sections, since we don't need this much length. So these are bits of aluminum profile, with one locking into the next, which allow for sliding them in and out, to get the precise height you need. We're about to do a test fit. Now if I understand correctly, the mechanism itself will be hidden inside, right? We'll make sure it's flush with the bodywork. We need to figure out where to put it. You see, right here the floor is level, but then from right here it has a kink going to the rear. So in theory, the closer we bring it to this side, the more chances for us to make it level with the floor, so that everything is even. But over here we have this bit, the frame extension, meaning that the entrance has to be right here. So that right there is how it'll be placed inside the bus. Now it's just a matter of hacking and pulling apart this section, and more test fitting. We also need to refresh the floor, given that the plywood is decomposing. And there's a frame underneath, which might also need a bit of reinforcement. As you can see, we've got this mighty vertical beam, so I take it we'll need to cut everything out to this beam. We will be able to touch up any welds that we need to. It's all very straightforward, and that's what I like the most about this build actually. This really isn't rocket science. The moment of truth, which we were working towards for this entire episode, and our greatest achievement as of right now. That really doesn't sound that impressive. It's lacking guide rails. I mean, we've yet to finalize everything. There are meant to be guides on either side to keep these shutters in place, but this is what certain bits of the bus look like, which meant that we couldn't fit the guides, and we're going to have to make some repairs. Here I have the exact same type of square tube, so we'll be replacing German tubing with Russian-made stuff. You know what? These rolling shutters actually look pretty sick. After we paint this white and add a set of guides, it's going to be nice and flush, and I reckon it is going to look super nice. Doesn't look too big compared to the rest of the bus, but it does make this rig just that much more functional. That panel is completely flat, but this one right here, as you can see, appears to be a bit roundish, so it's a bit crooked, but I think we can fix that. We'll find some way to secure it, apply some bog, and make it nice and even. What matters is that this part right here is in the proper straight position we need it to be. I think we should tend to the exterior styling later, once we finish the interior. I think this time we should avoid the mistakes we made in the past. So for now I suggest we do whatever we need to the exterior in making this rig fully functional, and then we can make this thing look good after. And we have these sorts of weird bits here and there. I couldn't even fit the roller mechanism up there, so I had to hammer it out. There used to be a dent up there. Notice how it doesn't fit anymore. Wait, so this is bog? Some aluminum bog, which is supposedly more durable, and a smattering of normal bog, like half an inch thick. We can actually use this exact same method ourselves once we get to doing a bit of panel work. Granted, we do have some experience of our own. We'll make it look nice and even. I'd say we took everything apart at just the right time. There is really nothing catastrophic to report here, nothing a bit of grinding and welding can't fix. I feel that we can still make this into a fully functional, sturdy and robust cargo bay. It's like the Lambo all over again. The days go by, and it doesn't seem like we're making any progress. If anything, the state of disarray is getting worse. It's different from the Lambo that the Lambo didn't have as much rust. Such thick-ass frame rails couldn't have rusted to the core, right? Okay, so this here is the bus frame, while this was tacked onto the frame. From the looks of it, I'd say it's a DIY job, dude. You really shouldn't be seeing this on a vehicle that was made in 1991, man. So either that or they didn't do a good job rust-proofing it. You know what I think? Regardless of the current situation, we'll be installing a bunch of hardware anyway, including heat insulation from underneath. So whatever's completely rotted, we can always fix with a welder. As for tearing the entire bus apart and doing some thorough welding, well, that just doesn't seem like a reasonable course of action. That would just be way too time-consuming, and it would seriously bog down the build. If you take a look at this pipe, you can tell that I tied into this spot right here, where it was meant to be. I also cut out this connection, and welded some metal back on at the same level. And you can clearly tell that it's angled, so this flank of our bus is so heavy that it's literally bending the floor. So there's that too. In your opinion, is this still a decent platform? Or are you having second thoughts? I'm beginning to understand why some buses cost 13 grand and others 250. Nobody's gonna allow you to do this deep of a pre-purchase inspection. In the vein of, hey, let's hack off a piece of the flank and take a look inside. Of course they'll tell you to look from the outside. So yeah, there you go. But what makes this a fantastic donor vehicle is that before us, somebody already worked on this cage with a welder, and we're able to tie into this cage. Someone welded on these jack supports, some mounts for those airbags. Someone has already tended to the load-bearing structure, meaning we don't have to. That's not a good look. All that's left of our bus. Those guys did tell us that it'd be easier to just weld everything from the ground up. We're basically following that exact method. The difference being that we're hacking off a little bit at a time. Yeah, as for these bits, in order to remove something like this, you have to hack it all the way around, give it a bit of persuasion with a hammer, and ultimately we're progressing very slowly. These kinds of metal bits need to be knocked off with a chisel, but the results are staggering. Let's do a cutaway shot and show the people. Our cargo bay is all nice and fresh. This isn't even a bay, it's more of a cabin. For real, man. Everything in there is so nice. And most importantly, the structural integrity is sound. Now this can easily accommodate a buggy, for example, or a moped. Curious to find out if you can fit a smart car in here. There does seem to be plenty of room. There is plenty of room now, but once we get a spare tire in here, plus we'll be using this bay to store firewood, a few bicycles, a couple of water containers, that'll eat up most of the space. Plus we should get some kind of shelf going. On one hand, it is kind of amazing that it took 1.5 weeks to cut the rotten bits out and weld some new metal in. The hacking was the most tedious part. I mean, we could have kept on going all the way to the driver's seat. There are a few rusty spots left over, but do we really want to start replacing these crossbeams? That'll just take forever. As they are sealed up, and the rust isn't going to get any worse. So I'd say we found a compromise here. We can be confident that this section won't fall off when we hit a bump. I have to say this does look sweet. We know precisely what's going on under the skin. And now we can go ahead and begin cladding the bus, making all of this look decent. After that we can turn our attention to the bedroom, and work our way towards the front of the bus, adding all of the hardware. It's like we had a hunch that we should work our way from back to front. Well, that does seem like the reasonable way to go. So while we were at it, a few new thoughts occurred to us in regards to the entrance. Here we have door number 2, with another one up front, and this one takes up a ton of space. We do need to measure it, of course. But theoretically, this could be space for a dirty water container, or maybe something else. You're suggesting we get rid of the middle door? We will have an auxiliary entrance back there, which we can use to climb into the cargo bay. Which is going to double as an emergency exit too. Whenever the front bed is folded out and somebody is sleeping on it, the bus will be impossible to exit if someone decides to make it outside. If we get rid of this exit, it'll just be lower, forcing you to duck. So if you really need to, you will be able to exit. Well, yeah, but we still need to think this one through. You know what, we'll get there, but for now we have all of this to tend to. Then we have to do this area, gradually begin work on the bathroom and the kitchen, and once we make it to this spot, we'll certainly have worked out some kind of solution. We'll have a definitive understanding on whether we need this space or we don't. I should say, I was convinced that until we spray on some paint and make this all look seamless, that it would look absolutely dreadful. But in fact, these shutters really complement the exterior of our bus.
Yeah, as soon as we trim off what we don't need,
it'll look as if it were a factory piece. I am a big fan of how they go up and down. Let's do a little premiere for our viewers. Look at all of that space.
These are spring actuated, which makes them easier to lift.
We just need to add a turnkey lock, and we'll be good. Then it'll be ready for use.
And with that, welcome to the cargo bay.
I think it turned out fantastic. Awesome. And the idea with making a second story, just like on that RV that we went and had a look at, this truly was the right way to go. But our iteration is even better, given that we're working with completely different dimensions. I love it. And we picked the right color. Honestly, it looks really good. We might need to work on these seams, among other things. But for the time being, we'll leave the fiddly stuff alone, to leave some room in case we want to make some major changes, install some closets, mounting points, or whatever else. For now, we've put together a sort of prototype version, which turned out pretty well. We've got heat insulation in the ceiling, and we're free to move on to something else.
There won't even be any heat insulation for this area, since those shutters definitely aren't keeping the cold out, and so there's no point in insulating the walls either. Though we did insulate the ceiling, since beyond the ceiling and that divider right there is where we'll have a warm room.
Since autumn is upon us and it is getting pretty chilly outside, our next logical step would be to install a heater.
Yeah, we install a heater, and we'll be able to comfortably continue working.
If we install a good heater, we won't even need a garage. In that case, we can just leave it outside and we'll still be able to happily work on the interior of the bus. As soon as we insulate the floors, seal everything off, a decent heater will make for more than tolerable working conditions.
I guess now you can call this a nice place to spend some time, compared to what it used to be anyway. Before, we had some kind of linoleum patches on the floor and other stuff like that.
Not to mention it was caving in each step you took. Once we did pull everything apart, it is a good thing we did all of that welding. What if we decided not to make a two-story setup? This cavity would have remained as it was, and that easily could have caused some issues, most likely far away from home, which would have cost us a small fortune. The rear end was literally hanging in the air. I don't even know what was holding it together. We're still going to be adding things to the cargo area, such as nutserts, for example, allowing for attaching certain new bits. We also have to work out where to put our suitcases, since they will be riding in this part of the bus. Then we have some shelves, closets, and that spare tire, of course. And it definitely needs to be secured in place.
Yeah, the spare tire is very heavy.
And it's about this big. We can fit some ramps over here in order to roll something heavy into the bay, if we need to. The only obvious drawback I can see is that the floor isn't level, meaning that we might have to have some wooden planks on hand. Just keep everything that we might need in here, in order to be able to solve any problem. I suggest we have a look at these shutters from the inside. Looks pretty nice and tidy, huh? I think this looks fantastic. This was a successful start in my estimation. The rear end had to be the worst section of the entire bus, and the most prone to corrosion, but if we were able to get that fixed, I take it the rest will be a walk in the park.
We might have some trouble with the driver's running board, which seems a bit soft when you climb in, but nothing we can't fix.
In my opinion, the bus still has some life in it. I gather the most difficult task for the near future will be heat insulating the floor. We're going to have to empty every cavity, look for a way to access the floor, cut everything to size on the spot, find a way to secure it. That could be troublesome.
Inserting heat insulation into cells, which by the way the entire floor of our bus consists of, it's actually not that time consuming. You basically cut it out to size, it's already sitting tight in there, you just secure it with some foam, and that's about it. In any case, our next episode will be about the fireplace, heater, as in we'll be sorting out the heating system. The guys from that shop said that we'll need some ventilation ducting on the ceiling, with an electric heater that would allow for quickly warming up the bus from a power outlet. Then it's a matter of using the heater to keep the bus warm and not waste any electricity. And that's it for this one. Subscribe so that you don't miss what's happening next. Big thanks for your attention, and hopefully you enjoyed watching this episode. Hit the like button. Let us know in the comments if you have any thoughts or ideas of your own. This won't be a quick build, so we'll have plenty of time to read through the comments. See you later!